There is a particular kind of exhaustion that nobody talks about. Not the exhaustion that comes from working too many hours or sleeping too few. Not the physical weight that sits in your legs after a long shift, or the dull ache behind your eyes after staring at screens all day. This is a different kind of tired. It is the exhaustion that settles into your chest after years of explaining yourself to people who were never really listening. It is the slow erosion that happens when you spend decades shrinking yourself, justifying your choices, softening your edges, rephrasing your truths so they sound more palatable to people who would never extend you the same courtesy. You wake up one morning and you realize you have spent more energy managing other people's perceptions of you than you have ever spent simply living. And the worst part is that nobody told you this would happen. Nobody warned you that the price of being liked was the slow disappearance of being yourself. You have probably felt this. Maybe you felt it at work when you stayed late to explain to a manager why your approach made sense, knowing he had already made up his mind. Maybe you felt it in a relationship when you tried to justify a feeling that should have needed no justification, only to watch the other person cross their arms and wait for you to stop talking. Maybe you felt it with family, books at a dinner table where your whole life became the subject of a verdict handed down by people who had never taken a single risk you had taken. You learned to explain yourself because you believed somewhere deep and early that if people just understood you better, they would treat you better. But here is the thing that Bukowski understood and spent a lifetime writing into the bones of American literature. Nobody who truly respects you has ever asked you to explain yourself. Charles Bukowski was not a man given to self-justification. He was not a man who sent long emails clarifying his intentions or rehearsed speeches in the bathroom mirror before difficult conversations. He was a man who worked terrible jobs in terrible conditions and wrote poetry in the hours between midnight and dawn. And he did not ask anyone if that was acceptable. He submitted his work to hundreds of literary magazines and received hundreds of rejections. And he did not write letters explaining why they were wrong. He drank hard and loved badly, and lived in rooms that smelled like old carpet. And when people told him that was not a proper way to live, he did not argue. He simply continued living that way. This was not arrogance. This was something much rarer and much more difficult. This was a man who had genuinely stopped requiring external permission to exist. And most of us were trained from childhood to believe that explanation is a form of respect. You explain yourself to your parents so they know you are responsible. You explain yourself to your teachers so they know you are capable. You explain yourself to your bosses so they know you are worth keeping. You explain yourself to your partners so they know you are trustworthy. And somewhere in all of that explaining, you forget that none of this was ever about respect. It was about control. That when someone demands an explanation from you, they are not asking to understand you better. They are asking you to stand still long enough for them to decide whether you deserve to pass. And if you have spent your whole life passing through those checkpoints with your papers in order, you have spent your whole life being managed by people who had no right to manage you. Bukowski understood this at a level that went beyond philosophy. He understood it in the body. No, in the way a man understands something after being beaten down enough times to stop flinching. He had worked at the post office for years, surrounded by supervisors who wielded petty authority like a weapon. And he had watched the other men fold themselves into shapes that would not upset the machinery. He watched men extinguish themselves slowly, daily, in the name of keeping a job they hated. He saw what the constant need for approval did to a person over a decade, over 2 decades, all over a lifetime. It hollowed them out. It replaced whatever original shape they had arrived with in something smooth and featureless and manageable. And he decided, at some point, that was probably not dramatic, and probably happened on an ordinary afternoon, that he would rather be poor and intact than comfortable and empty. This is the moment in a video like this one where I want to stop and ask you something directly, not as a rhetorical device, not to fill space, but because I genuinely believe that what I'm about to ask has the power to crack something open in you if you let it. When was the last time you said something true about yourself without immediately softening it, qualifying it, or wrapping it in a layer of apology so the person hearing it would not feel challenged? When was the last time you made a choice that was fully yours without drafting a justification in your head first? If you are watching this and feeling something tighten in your chest right now, it is because you know the answer, and the answer is uncomfortable. And I want you to know that discomfort is not weakness. It is the first sign that something in you is still alive and still hungry for something more honest than the life you have been performing. If this is reaching you today, go to the comments and write, "I am done explaining myself to people who never asked to understand me." Write it and mean it. Because somewhere underneath this video, right now, there is someone else watching who has been carrying the same silence you have been carrying, and your words might be the first true thing they read today that makes them feel less alone in it. Bukowski did not believe that solitude was a punishment. He believed it was a condition of integrity. In his poem after poem, story after story, he returned to the image of the man alone in the room, a bottle within reach. It's a typewriter making noise in the dark, the city outside doing what cities do, grinding forward without tenderness or pause. And what strikes you if you read him carefully enough is that this man alone in the room is not miserable. He is not wallowing. He is not performing suffering for an audience that never arrives. He is, in some fundamental and almost sacred way, free. Free from the obligation of performing himself for anyone else's comfort. Free from the labor of curating his presentation. As free from the 1,000 tiny indignities that accumulate when you spend your time in the company of people who never chose you, but to whom you feel inexplicably accountable. The philosophy embedded in Bukowski's work is not nihilism, though it is often mistaken for that. Nihilism says nothing matters. What Bukowski was doing was more precise and more demanding than that. He was saying that most of the things people treat as if they matter enormously, the approval of strangers, the tidiness of one's public image, the performance of ambition and propriety and social fitness, do not actually matter at all. And the things that do matter, the honest word, the moment of real connection, the work done in private without an audience, the body's needs met without shame, these are the things that get traded away in the bargain that society offers and that almost everyone accepts without reading the terms. He was not saying live without meaning. He was saying stop confusing meaning with recognition. There is something Bukowski once said in an interview that stays with you long after you hear it. He said that the problem with the world is that the intelligent people are full of doubts while the stupid ones are full of confidence. Read that again and feel what it does to you. Because if you are someone who has spent your life over-explaining yourself, you probably recognize something in that. You probably recognize the experience of watching less thoughtful, less careful, less honest people move through the world with a certainty you could never manufacture, and wondering what was wrong with you that you could not perform that certainty convincingly. The answer Bukowski would have given you is that nothing is wrong with you. The doubt is the intelligence. The hesitation is the awareness. And the people who never doubt themselves are not braver than you. They are simply less conscious of the complexity they are trampling over. What makes this harder is that we live in a culture that has commodified self-expression while simultaneously punishing authenticity. We are surrounded by the performance of honesty. People who craft carefully considered vulnerability for an algorithm, who share their darkest moments in formats optimized for engagement, who speak about rawness and realness in language that has been focus grouped and approved. And somewhere in all of that noise, the genuinely raw thing, the thing that has not been shaped for consumption, gets harder and harder to find. Bukowski's work survives because it does not perform anything. It simply is. It does not try to make you comfortable. It does not check to see if you are still watching. It is indifferent to your approval in the way that a true thing is always indifferent to whether or not it is believed. And this is where the transformation begins. Not with a dramatic gesture, not with a manifesto, not with a declaration that you will never again justify yourself to anyone. Those declarations last about 48 hours before the social pressure reasserts itself, and you find yourself back in the familiar crouch, softening and qualifying and explaining. The transformation Bukowski points toward is quieter and more permanent than that. It is the slow process of learning to distinguish between the explanations you offer freely because communication matters to you and you care about the person in front of you, and the explanations you perform out of fear, out of the belief that without them, you will be found unacceptable and discarded. One kind of explanation is an act of love. The other is an act of surrender, and the work is learning to stop offering the second kind, not loudly, not dramatically, but simply. It's the way you stop doing anything that has stopped serving you. Bukowski's life was not a template. He was not a man to be imitated wholesale. He drank more than was good for him. He loved in ways that caused real damage. He lived in ways that were sometimes genuinely squalid. And he was honest enough to write about that without making it romantic. What he was, at his core, was someone who refused the central lie that most lives are built on. The lie that says your worth is determined by how well you perform acceptability for other people. He spent 40 years insisting, in poem after poem, story after story, that the life lived on your own terms, even poorly, even messily, even in conditions that most people would pity or judge, was more alive than any life perfectly curated to meet someone else's expectations. You are allowed to take up space without first earning the right to take up space. You are allowed to have opinions that make other people uncomfortable. You are allowed to make choices that do not require external validation. You are allowed to be a person in the full, complicated, contradictory, imperfect sense of that word, without first submitting your personhood for review. This is not a radical idea. It should not feel as radical as it does, but it does feel radical, or because you have been trained for so long to filter yourself through the anticipated reactions of people who are themselves too busy filtering themselves to ever really see you clearly. Stop explaining yourself once a day, not as a performance of confidence you do not feel, not as a statement about who you are trying to become, just once in some small interaction where the old habit would have kicked in and made you justify, defend, or apologize for something that did not need justification. Old defense or apology simply do not. See what happens in the silence where the explanation would have been. See who it reveals in you and in the person across from you. Because what Bukowski knew, and what took him decades of ugly, difficult, honest living to confirm, is that the people worth keeping in your life have never needed you to explain yourself to them. They already knew who you were, and they stayed anyway. If something in this video cracked something open for you today, yes, if it touched a part of your life that you have not seen reflected honestly in a long time, press like right now. Not for the algorithm, but because this kind of content does not reach the people who need it unless the people who felt it push it forward. Every like is this message finding someone who is tired, who has been explaining themselves for years, and who needs to hear exactly this today. And if you want to keep having your thinking rearranged by ideas that do not ask your permission to be honest with you, subscribe to this channel. This is a place built for people who are done with comfortable noise and ready for something that actually tells them the truth. Every video here is made with that one person in mind, the one who is watching alone, at an hour when the world has gone quiet, still carrying the weight of everything they were never allowed to simply be.